2 articles from Tablet magazine on my Facebook wall that discussed issues of suicide and depression. One article titled "Breaking the Jewish Community's Silence Around Suicide" spoke about Asher Lobi, a man who had attempted suicide and felt like he had nowhere to turn. The article spoke about the organization that helped him, called Elijah's Journey, whose founder is here with us tonight, and the incredible work that they do. The other article, titled "Stopping Suicide Online," spoke about a comedian who responded to an anonymous fan's question. The fan wrote that they were in a really dark place, and they were wondering if the comedian, who had written about his struggle with depression, had ever contemplated suicide. Instead of ignoring the question, the comedian writes, "You are a person and you're in pain, and that makes me care." And he goes on to write a long response about his experience, encouraging and supporting this anonymous fan. After seeing these articles on my wall, Yoni Tights basically emailed me and said that this is something that our shul needs to start talking about. And that's kind of how this whole conversation started. Soon after that, a few of us, including Yamit Alfred-Cole, Jason Strauss, Yoni, and myself, came together and just started planning this program. We wanted to increase awareness, inform and educate the community, and let people know that they aren't alone. Tonight, we're really happy to present a panel of speakers who are going to do just that on the topics of depression and suicide. In planning this program and speaking to numerous mental health professionals about this struggle and other struggles, we realized that this conversation is only a starting point. We still have so much more to talk about. We are very excited to announce that this workshop is the first in a series here at Mount Sinai designed to increase awareness, provide information, and help people feel that they are not alone in struggling or supporting someone who is struggling with the challenge, especially those that are often not spoken about in our community, taboos. Please look out for announcements about future Smashing Silence, Tackling Taboos workshops. And if there's any particular topics that you would like to see spoken about in the future, please write your suggestions on the index cards on your chairs. For tonight's presentation, we have 4 speakers, all of whom are gracious enough to share with us their experience and their wisdom. We really thank you guys for coming here tonight. Our first speaker, Rabbi Nati Helfgot, is the chair of Department of Talmud and Rabbinics at SAR High School. He's a tremendous leader in the modern Orthodox community and has served as chair of the Departments of Bible and Jewish Thought at YCT and director of Jewish Studies at Mayanot. He is a former leader in the RCA, he has been a leader in the RCA, the IRF, and the Orthodox Caucus and Orthodox Forum. He is the author of various halachic essays and has served as editor of several journals. Most relevant to us here tonight, though, is that in the fall of 2001, Rabbi Helfgot published an article in the OU's Jewish Action, speaking about his personal experience with depression. This was a watershed moment in the Jewish community, which was instrumental in opening up the conversation in the Orthodox community about mental health. Our second speaker, Mark Fine, graduated from YU in 2007. He is currently the Director of Experiential Education for NCSY in Toronto, Canada. He previously served as the Regional Director of Upstate New York region of NCSY, coordinated volunteer services for National NCSY, and was a Presidential Fellow for the Office of the President at YU. He spoke last year at an event run by Active Minds, a student-run mental health awareness, education, and advocacy organization on college campuses. Mark is also an alumnus of Mount Sinai Jewish Center. Listening to his speech from the YU Active Minds event last year deeply affected me, as I know that it did for anyone else who also listened. Dr. Yair Kramer, our third speaker, is a licensed psychologist who works in Riverdale, New York. He's a supervising clinician at the Brooklyn College Counseling Center and an adjunct professor in the Brooklyn College Mental Health Counseling Program. His clinical experience has focused on working with adolescents, adults, and couples. And our fourth speaker, Efrem Epstein, graduated from Johns Hopkins University and was previously the Chief Communications Officer at Survival Sharing Incorporated. He also worked as a journalist and public relations executive. Most relevant to us to hear tonight, though, is that he started Elijah's Journey in 2009, an organization that provides a Jewish response to issues of suicide awareness and prevention. Everyone here has index cards on their chairs. We are going to take questions later after all the presenters speak, so you could use the index cards to write down questions that you want to remember or to write down ideas for future events. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here once again in Washington Heights. I spent 16 years of my life, a third of my life in Washington Heights, in high school, college, to graduate school, smicha, and living in the Heights. I lived on Audubon for a couple of years, single, for a while, before making the trek to the west side. So I know these days goes both ways. People come from the west side to Washington Heights back. But it's wonderful to be here with you, and thank you for inviting me. I just need to make a disclaimer this evening. I have to leave earlier because my son is getting bar mitzvah this Shabbos. And originally, I think it was supposed to be Wednesday night, but then we moved to Thursday night. So I'm on a short leash this evening, and have to finish the siyum with my son this evening as well. So there's a lot of stuff to do. But it is such an important topic that I did want to be here with you this evening, at least for a bit. About 2 weeks ago, I got an email from an educator who wanted to ask me for an article on Shabbat and Mikdash that I had written. So I sent it to him, and it was out of the blue, and I didn't remember the name. And then all of a sudden, thank God with emails, you can check the name. And it turned out the first time this educator contacted me was 4 years ago. And this was the email from December 2010. Shalom, Rabbi Helfgot. As someone who suffered from depression, I was impressed by your article. It was the article that was mentioned. From time to time, I have considered doing the same in the hope that by doing so, I could make one more chip in the wall of ignorance. A former student committed suicide earlier this week. The second time a former student had done so this year. I am again considering doing so. For now, I posted your article, which has already been well received. I am wondering now, with the benefit of perspective, whether you would do it again, and what were the positives and what were the negatives. And so this kind of brought home, preparing and thinking about this program this evening, that, whatever you write 10 years ago, you write 12 years ago, you run a program, you never know who you're going to touch, you never know what nerve and what chord you're going to touch, and it's very important. And in a certain sense, there's a kind of cyclical nature that we need to keep having programs like this because, people grow up and there's openness and then we close and then we open again. 8 years ago, I spoke at a program at Stern, which was also exactly very similar. And 7 years before that, I had written the article and we had a program on the west side. We had about 300 people. The first time that there was a program discussing it and people sharing their experiences. And I think it's very important to break down the wall, even though it's less than it used to be, but it still exists on some level. And like so many things having to do with certain social taboos, the observant community is always 10 or 20 years behind. When it came to opening up about developmentally disabled children. So today, it's very sexy, everybody goes to HASP, and it's very cool and everything, but, we were still lagging 10 or 20 years behind the general community. And the same thing when it came to issues of mental health, that American society in general only really started to open up about it in the early 90s, when William Styron wrote a book called Darkness Visible, which is a very worthwhile, it's really the first book about someone prominent writing about their experience. And Tipper Gore, when Al Gore's wife, talked about it, and it was very different because 20 years before that, someone who had been running for vice president because he had mental illness issues was kind of automatically disqualified. And thank God we're moving, and the Jewish community has moved somewhat as well, but we still need to talk about it and be honest about it and describe it. I just want to share, just in a few brief moments, some of my experience. But I also, Jason had asked me, I also wanted to, as an educator, I think it's important to recognize that depression is not just a modern phenomenon. Whether there's a whole debate today. Psychologists can talk about it, that today, is it more prevalent? Is it less prevalent? Is it just more diagnosed? Also because, when you're not being chased by lions and other things, you have other, so we don't have to worry about survival, so we have more time to worry about other things, right? There's a whole discussion in the literature about that. But the reality is that amongst at least Jewish males, I know I did some research about Jewish males in the course between 20 and 40, it's going to be a good 25% that'll probably experience some form of depression in their life, mild to serious depression. And that means that it's a reality, and it's always been a reality. And I think that even if we look to our sources, we can find that people describe their feelings, which is very, very akin to what I think many people who experience a serious depression experience. I just, at random, I was looking, when I was last year, I was teaching a little bit about some of the Tehillim and depression, and I just, Tehillim 55, Nun Hey, where David, or whoever wrote this Tehillim, says, he calls out to God and he says, Arid b'sichi v'ahima, I'm distraught and I moan. Libi yachil b'kirbi, my heart writhes in pain in my soul. Ve'emot mavet, the terrors of death fall upon me. Yir'ah v'rad, I'm fear and trembling. Vatchaseni palatzut. And then he speaks about, I wish I had, V'omar mitein ever kayona ufa. Can I run away from this? Is he running away to commit suicide? Is he running away from his troubles? Is he running away? Achisha miflat, I wish I could find a shelter. Meruach soa misa'ara. From this stormy wind, from the tempest, from the mind storm that is serious clinical depression. And there are many other Tehillim where I think David HaMelech expressed these feelings. Tehillim Lamed Chet, he writes about Ein Shalom ba'atzamai. There's no peace in my bones. My very bones are full of fear. Nifugotai v'nitketi ad ma'od. I am sorely crushed. I am sorely benumbed. Sha'agati minamat libi. I groan from the mourning of my heart. Azavani kochi. All my strength is lifted. V'or einai gam'em. And even the light from my eyes has left me. It's a very powerful image that David uses. So this is the reality of depression. Is a reality, I think, that throughout history people experienced, and even the greatest, and even our sources point to it. And it's a reality that, as I said, it's something that we have to honestly speak about, and hopefully, as he said in the email, chip away at this phenomenon. I'll tell quickly my story. I've written about it. I came back from a sabbatical in Israel. I was very successful. I helped start a school called Mayanot. And 2 months into the school, all of a sudden, I wasn't able to sleep. And it wasn't that I wasn't able to sleep for a day or two, but I wasn't able to sleep for a week in a row. My head was on fire. I couldn't shut it off. I didn't know. And as time went on, I started to lose my appetite. I started to lose any emotion. You talk about depression. It's the wrong word also. People say depression. The Yankees lost, I'm depressed. And I broke up with my girlfriend, I'm depressed. And someone who's in clinical depression, we really need a different word for it. But the reality is that we use that word. And things got worse and worse. Was not really able to function. And only because I reached out to a dear friend who was also a psychologist, and I started to describe to him what I was feeling. And there was no trigger. Thank God, no one died in my family. Thank God, nothing happened. Sometimes there's triggers in life. But sometimes it's just the brain chemistry and the reality. And the seasons changing. And who knows? And a combination of life and its stresses and its lack of stresses and was not really able to feel anything as time wasn't that I was sad and crying all day, but just wasn't able to feel anything. And some people, they can't get out of bed, and I couldn't go to sleep, and I couldn't turn my mind off. And I felt suffocating, this intense burning almost. And it was very, very and scary. And I turned to a friend, and he said, I think that you should go see someone because I think you're in the midst of a very serious depressive episode. And I did go see someone, thank God. Some people, when they go to their therapist, they don't click so well. I was able to click with the therapist that I connected with, and slowly, took a time with medication and with therapy, was able to pull out of many of the throes of the most intense depression. But it took a long time. It took months. I had to stop working. And in the midst of the depression, it was so, I couldn't learn, which for me was, I loved learning. I couldn't read. The only thing I could read about was depression. I went to Barnes & Noble and would sit there for 5 hours on 81st Street or 82nd Street and read about depression. I wasn't really hungry, but I had to eat. I realized, I thank God didn't have real suicidal thoughts, but I wasn't hungry, didn't have appetite, didn't have emotion. I mean, I always describe, New Yorkers really understand this. I once spoke in Cleveland and they didn't fully get it, but I said, what's the best feeling? You're on the local and the express comes and you just mamish get it. And I said, I was on the train and the train came and I felt nothing. Happy, not happy. And that sense of being just the tabula rasa, of not having any emotion, of being shut down, together with feeling suffocating, together with feeling purposelessness, together with feeling, are you ever going to get out of it? That crushing feeling of pain and hopelessness. And not being able to sleep. I mean, it was all a combination. It fed one to the other. I would get up, I tried to go to sleep, I couldn't sleep. I would walk in the streets of New York. I got up early in the morning, I walked up and down, because you have energy. I waited till my gym opened, so I could go to the gym. And then when they finished with the gym, I would walk down to Midtown and go bowling at Port Authority, just to do something. Otherwise, with your life. Thank God it started to get better. And one of the reasons that I chose to, and when on medication, when I'm Paxil, and I always said that, if Chazal were alive today, Chazal would have instituted a blessing on antidepressants, because if they work, they certainly are as good as any besamim or anything else that we enjoy. And unfortunately, and the protocol, after a year of therapy and medication, started to titrate. You start to go down on the medication because, we always assume you're supposed to, it's better not to be on medication than to be on medication. Of course, at least for me, a year later, the same thing happened and went through the same process. And again, so I was on medication for 2 years. And then you titrate, and then the same thing happened. And so now, Baruch Hashem, I'm on a maintenance dose forever, and it's okay, I'm still the same person. Got married in the midst of that, had 4 wonderful children. Thank God, I have a very successful career. And like my father, since I was a little kid, I remember him taking blood pressure medicine for 50 years. So I'll take till I die, I'll take a little pill till I die as a maintenance dose. Is it really working? Is it not working? Who knows? But that's the reality. And what struck me, and the reason why I always talk about it, was I would go to my therapist on the west side, very expensive therapist, because it was close, and I would see Hasidic people coming out of the therapy, because they wouldn't go to the borough park, where it was much cheaper, because they didn't want the family to see that they were going.
But they all went to the
right,
side.
And I would talk to friends, and they say, oh yeah, when I was in high school, I had this. My mother had this postpartum. My cousin had this. My father, and it was like not 6 degrees of separation. It was like 2 degrees. Everybody knew somebody who had some connection to depression. And now, like they say in the world of psychology, it's the common cold of mental illness. We're talking about the most common mental illness. and all of a sudden, it was like this open secret that in the Jewish community, people had this, but no one was willing to talk about it openly. And so I felt it was very important to talk about this. And I continue to feel that we all have to, do whatever we can to make ourselves aware about this. Thank God today there's a tremendous amount of information where we can get a sense. We have to be ready for ourselves, to be able to take care of ourselves if we feel that, to know that we're going through something, to reach out to friends and to professionals who can be of assistance to us so that we don't spiral. And also to when we see our friends in trouble, or we see differences, serious differences in mood, in attitude, in behavior, etc., that we are there for them, and that we care about them, and that we are, as a community, a committed, loving, concerned community, that we are, that we're not stigmatizing people so that they're afraid to talk about it before it gets too late, and it cycles in a way that's very dangerous for them and for their families. And so, that's why I think it's very important to have this kind of a program. Not all the stories have happy endings, unfortunately. Like any medical intervention, I have a very happy story. I found the right therapist right away. I found the right medication. There's some people who it's a much bigger struggle, that they go through years and years and continue to go through years of trying to find the right balance of medication or other medical interventions, whether it's cognitive therapy or certain medications or other medications, or even shock therapy, which is much more focused today than it was, and we have to be as supportive and compassionate and involved in the best way that we can. So I wanted to wish Yasher Koach, and also to encourage people to become knowledgeable and sensitive. That's what we're supposed to be as a community to each other, and that's part of my story. Again, I don't want to take up all the airtime tonight, so I wanted to share.
You don't need it. You don't have to use it. But
in that case, do we want to just? Don't worry about that at all. Hello. Everyone looks so sad and depressed.
We're just sleeping.
That's good. In that case, I'm glad you're awake. My name's Mark Fine. First, I just wanted to thank the committee and everyone for putting this together. I know the question is sometimes asked, why is this something that a shul should be hosting? What's the relevance? And I think that if a synagogue, if a shul is a place where we're supposed to be completely ourselves and completely at home, the only way that we can do that is if we know that we can truly be completely ourselves in the community and completely ourselves in our spiritual home. And I can say, and you'll hear my personal story in a moment, that mental illness, and especially as it relates to religiosity, the two are very much intertwined when it comes to being a part of a community or being withdrawn from a community, and self-perception and guilt and all of those fun, wonderful things that we'll talk about. So I think it's imperative and wonderful that the shul is hosting such an event. So kudos to the committee and to all of you for coming. Now that we've got the self-congratulation out of the way, so I just want to start by saying that I do not speak on behalf of all depressed people. I'm here purely to share my own personal experience. We actually wanted to take a vote at the official depressed convention as to who would be the official representative of depression. Unfortunately, everyone was too apathetic to show up, so that never actually happened. I appreciate the laughter. Anyway, so in the next 15 minutes or so, I'm just going to share my own story, my own experience, and we'll see where that goes. So. My name's Mark Fine, grew up in Riverdale, New York. I'm not going to comment on the fact that there are 3 different people up here of connections to Riverdale. It truly is a wonderful community. I'm sure it's just a correlation and not causation. And I, again, as heard by the bio and as Rav Nati mentioned in his own story, I had no reason to be depressed, and that was actually something that on its own was very depressing and challenging for me. And it sounds amusing, but something that I know I very much struggled with and thought about. I'm not actually texting anyone. I'm just making sure that I stay onto my time, which is rare if you've ever heard me public speak before. So I'm keeping the clock up here. Also, if anybody wants to record, they're more than welcome to. I don't know if people are recording or not, but if you are, great, send it out, in which case feel free to edit out all the jokes beforehand because nobody cares. I first, I guess, began feeling that something was off. Without being able to articulate what it was, when I was in high school, I distinctly remember sophomore year of high school, going on Machach, being as part of that wonderful social environment that is adolescence and an Israel teen touring program, and thinking to myself, I wonder if I ceased to exist. If I just wasn't here anymore, would anybody notice? And that was like the first time I remember like asking that question of myself. Like, if I just weren't here anymore, like, would anybody notice that I wasn't here? And again, sort of went away, had a wonderful rest of summer, but I distinctly remember having that thought. High school is high school, the less said the better. We're going to fast forward to Israel. First time away from home, first time away from that support structure, first time I really had to start figuring myself out in many ways, especially since I always played to expectations. I was always the firstborn, I was always the successful one. I always knew, okay, this is what the adults wanted from me, this is what the structure wanted from me, this is what I need to do in order to be successful, and then was taken out of that environment, and now sort of needed to fend for myself a little bit. And I wasn't aware of it at the time, but some of my Rabbeim actually had me on what they called my monthly cycle, which was pretty much once a month. I would just get angry and sort of withdraw and pick fights with people. Wasn't something that I was aware of doing. Apparently it worked like clockwork. They had a chart for it and everything. And again, that was like questions I started asking myself, but at the same time, if you just saw me from the outside, hey, he's in the base midrash, he learns, he's doing great, he's very successful. You would have asked the same questions in high school. Academically, good GPA, good SAT scores, he's doing great, successful. And then the same thing held true in college, got involved with NCSY, remarkably 9 years ago. I don't ask my NCSYers what they were doing 9 years ago because they don't remember, because some of them were 4. I get older, they stay the same age. It's remarkable how life works. And again, continued on, like being successful, doing my own thing. And that pretty much continued until, we'll say 2008 or so. 2008, again, I was working for NCSY, pretty much part-time, while also working for Yeshiva University full-time, working in we'll call it a stressful office environment, especially since that was around when Madoff happened. It was a really fantastic time to be working for Yeshiva University while living in Washington Heights, where the one thing that everyone has an opinion on, aside from the rabbi's drush, is what YU is and what they should be doing with their money. I became very firm that year about not discussing work at the Shabbos table. What do you do? I don't talk about work on Shabbos. So that was another wonderful challenging experience. And it was really at that point where I started to notice for myself a change in my behavior, but one that I was always able to explain away. So, for example, when we talk about like being withdrawn or being tired, we use a lot of words to describe depression, and this is something Nati also touched on, that people use in their daily life, which I think sometimes confuses the difference between what it means to be depressed and tired and withdrawn, the way that we use the word, and the way that society as a whole uses the word. So I just want to give you a couple of examples from my own experience of when we say the word, or in this case, I'm speaking only on myself, when I use the word tired, withdrawn, depressed, ruminating, what that means. And for me, what that meant was after a major NCSY event, for the next, let's say, 3 or 4 days afterwards, I just wouldn't talk to anybody. What does that mean I wouldn't talk to anyone? It means I would literally shut off my phone and withdraw from the world because I just couldn't handle conversations with people. I was too emotionally spent. And anytime someone would call, without even knowing what it was about, whether it was a friend, family member, I would automatically assume that either I had done something wrong or that they needed something from me. And therefore, as long as I don't pick up the phone, I'm fine. Of course, that led to a backlog, which then eventually I had to deal with, and then things weren't fine. Like, they would have been fine, but I made them not fine, which was a particular talent of mine for many years. One of my NC Sparks is laughing in the room because they tried to call me and I didn't pick up. And, but that's what I was saying with withdrawal. At the same time, anyone looking from the outside wouldn't necessarily have known that anything was going on because everything was explainable. That, oh, Mark had a major event last week, so of course he's not talking to people this week. Like, he's tired. He needs his break. He needs to go away for a little bit. And I think when we talk about what it means to recognize in the community and what does it mean to reach out, which I'll get to at the end, sometimes it's not the easiest explanation in terms of what's going on and what it means to provide support, which I'll get to afterwards. So that's for me what it meant to be withdrawn. Sometimes we use the word anxious. So what did anxious mean to me in terms of anxiety? It meant, I'll use a practical example from Washington Heights land. Someone wants to set you up with a guy or girl, in which case you said yes, they said yes, now you just need to make a phone call, which means that you know the answer is going to be yes. How do you know the answer is going to be yes? Because you actually bother to go through a shadchan or someone to set you up, which means you know that if you just call the person at the right time, the answer will be yes. That's just how the process is set up, precisely to remove any anxiety from the situation. And yet, what would happen is, I haven't even got to the punchline yet, and he's already lost it. I know there's a helpline, you can call for that. That I would dial the number, and then I would pause before actually pressing talk, like just to make sure I was really ready for this conversation. And by then, the phone would reset, so I'd have to dial the number again. But by then, the phone would reset, so I repeat this process like 3 or 4 times. By then, I was sweating, so clearly I needed to take a shower. So I take a shower like to fully calm myself down. And by then, there was actually a problem because I never called the person. So, like when I talk about anxiety, it's not rational. Like, anxiety is not nervousness, that, oh, I'm nervous to do something. Anxiety is, I'm prevented from doing something that I know I can and should do, and I just can't, and I don't know why. Again, with therapy and with medication, you can come up with strategies in order to combat that and overcome that. But anxiety and nervousness are 2 very different things. When we talk about being tired and being lethargic and apathetic, like there were days where this was my process for getting out of bed in the morning. I would literally think to myself, okay, left foot over the bed. Okay, great. Right foot over the bed. Okay, great. Now we're going to stand up. Fantastic. And I would narrate to myself all the steps that I needed to take in order to get myself going. And I would like count to 10. I would create a little countdown for myself. Okay, I'm going to stand in 10. And I would count down until I actually stood up. Okay, like now I'm going to make myself get breakfast. And then I would go and do that. And that's sort of how I tricked myself into doing things in terms of just getting up in the morning. Like that's when we say like we're tired or lethargic, don't have the energy to do things. It's not, oh, I'm not sure if I want to go out Saturday night because, you know what, like I didn't get my Shabbos nap in. It's, I need to think about how I'm going to get out of bed because this isn't natural to me anymore. I need to think myself through the process of getting up. Thankfully, I had lots of healthy habits that came out of this. I was actually in the best shape of my life when I was depressed because, and again, this isn't true for everyone by any stretch, is I needed to find ways to distract myself. Because again, as long as I wasn't inside of my own head, I was fine. So my mother's a gym teacher. The way that I did that was I went to the gym, and I literally exhausted myself. Because as long as I exhausted myself, I couldn't think. And that also went true for work. As long as I exhausted myself, no one, I'll be fine. No one will know anything is wrong. So at the same time where I was going through what I later found out was a major depressive episode, I was running events for hundreds of teens across the country, literally burning myself out because that way I wouldn't have to think. And also that way I would always have an alternate explanation to myself about why I felt the way that I did. Oh, it's not that I was depressed or that something was wrong. I'm just burning myself out because I'm too busy doing good for other people. And that's how the rationalization process kept a lot of unhealthy habits going for a long time. I'm not unhealthy, I'm just too healthy. If only I wasn't so healthy, then I wouldn't have any problems. Gosh darn it, I better stop being so healthy. And that got to the point where eventually I just broke. What does breaking mean? I got to the point where if anyone wanted to compliment me, I had to leave the room. Like I was at an NCSY event, I knew the rabbi was going to say about what a wonderful job I was doing. I made sure to leave the room. It got to the point where when people called, again, like I said before, in terms of being withdrawn and just removing myself. And by the way, my roommates didn't know that anything was going on. Both my first depressive episode, which I completely managed to work through, or the second one, that my roommates did not know that anything was wrong or going on, and I'm not sure, by the way, and I've had this conversation with them, that there was anything they could have done differently, because I flat out lied to them. And they made the mistake of believing me. Shame on them for believing me when I said, this is what's going on. Are you sure you're okay? Yeah, I'm fine, don't worry about it. Okay, you don't want to come out to Shabbos meal? Yeah, it's fine, don't worry about it. Really, I work so many Shabboses, I need a break. Okay, Mark's just being eccentric, he's being a little isolationist. Okay, it's completely rational behavior, don't worry about it, it's fine. Until the point where it wasn't fine anymore, and I completely broke down. And the way that I actually ended up getting therapy was, again, going back to classic Heiss example, this is where I was a complete jerk, not the first time, wouldn't be the last time, although this is the second time that's on tape now, so if I ever get a date again, that's fantastic. Was, again, went out with a girl, great first date, didn't call afterwards, again, whether it's because that's anxiety or a jerk, we'll leave that open to narrative interpretation. And she called me out on it, and we went for a walk afterwards, had a long conversation. It turns out that she actually had a history of mental health issues. And when I was just describing, because I was open with her, just about how I was feeling and what I was doing, and she basically said, you need to get help. And she was the first person to ever tell me that I needed to get help. And I think until then, I still had this completely idealized self-image of, I'm the person who does not need help, the person who does not need to rely upon anybody else. I'm the person who provides support to other people. I'm the one who's fine. That's the first time that sort of cracked for me. I said, okay, I need help. It's the first time I admitted it to myself. And when I actually went to my parents to talk to them about therapy, I actually lied about why I needed therapy. They were always into the whole, oh, Mark, you're an older single, if you ever need therapy for relationships, let us know. You laugh. That's true story. And I lied. I said, you know what, Mom, you're right, I should get therapy for that, get me the number, and I'll go. And thankfully, they were supportive and everything else. It was only months later where I actually, although she for sure knew something else was up, but whatever. She's my mom, she knows these things. Completely lied because I wasn't ready to admit that to myself. And even the first stages of therapy, and the reason why I share my story as a very quick aside, is less for the destigmatization aspect and more for the people in the audience who think they need help or don't know if they need help or feel as if there's a story that nobody else gets or understands, which I think for me was a big factor of hearing other people's stories and the reactions I got to when I shared my story the first time, which was, oh, you're describing a world that I inhabit and a world that other people don't get. And I think for me that's the biggest barrier when it comes to opening up to friends or admitting to yourself that's something that you need help with are all the, well, that's not me. I'm not the person who needs help. Or I have nothing that I should need help with. Like, I come from a stable family. I have a good job. There's nothing wrong with my life. How come I feel this way? Well, it can't be that I feel this way. There must be something else going on. Or I can't talk to my friends. How are they going to feel? Or they don't really get it because they're going to tell me to snap out of it. Or they're going to tell me, oh, just here's some ice cream. Or just like, just. And if there's one piece of advice, and this is something that a bunch of people asked me before the event to speak about, which I actually don't have any experience with. I have lots of experience with being the depressed guy, not so much with helping other depressed people, is, okay, so what do I do? And if a friend's in this situation, how do I help? What can I do? It's really just unconditional love and support and, like, hugs and being there and just honestly asking, oh, well, that's my 15 minutes. See, I told you I was keeping track. See, he's very chipper. Like, that was unconditional support. We'll be here whether you like it or not. Metaphor actually works quite well. But it's just, again, it's just being there. And there's this sense of, and I'll read you a poem just to be completely cliche afterwards that I wrote. There's this sense of, I am not deserving of love. I'm not deserving of respect. I'm not deserving of attention. I do not deserve to exist on some level. And again, thankfully, I was never actually suicidal, with the big difference being that I had suicidal thoughts and ideation, but I never actually had an actionable plan, which is a big distinction when it comes to whether you're suicidal or not. Like an example might be that I would think when I was working in Belfer, oh, I wonder if I fell out the window and get hit by a car, like what would happen? Like, that's an example of having suicidal thoughts but not actually being suicidal. He can talk more about that. And like, you just don't believe you're worth anything. And you come up with every explanation in the book for why you're not worth anything. And especially if you're smart, you can pretty much destroy any argument for why what you're doing is good. Oh, it could have been better if. A different therapist I spoke to once called it the big but phenomenon. Oh, it was great, but da-da-da-da-da. Right, all about that bass. Like, this was really good. It was just sitting there. It was too easy. But that really is what, I was really great, but, and here's why everything is actually awful and sucks. And that goes for your friends also. It's that, oh, if they only knew me, then they wouldn't be friends with me. If they only knew that, then A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And the only thing that cuts through that is just actual caring and actual love. And every time that they rebuff you, even though it seems like you're being annoying, again, at least in terms of my experience, to go back and just let them know that you're there and that you care. Not because they need you, but because they want to be there. And not to try to explain away, and not to try to help. They don't need your help. They need your love. And there's a big difference between those two. And when they're ready for help, they'll ask for it. Or if you want, you can subtly, like, I know someone that if you want and you're ready, I know someone that you can talk to. And that's why, by the way, I think, going back to why it's so important that the shul is running this, for people to know, okay, there's someone in the shul. And for example, I spoke to Rabbi Schwartz about this event, and he's sorry that he couldn't be here, and something that he's very supportive of, to know, okay, I can go to the Rav of my shul and say, I need help. Because so much of that is, even when you finally get up the energy to ask for help, to know where to go to get that, it's really difficult. Finding a therapist is not easy. Finding a firm therapist, if you're not a firm therapist, is even harder. Working your way through all the insurance issues and paying for things and everything else is really complicated. Precisely at a time where you don't have the energy to deal with complicated. Thankfully, I had an excellent support system. Not everybody does. So for you to be able to know how to be there for someone, or to know, okay, here's the call to someone who will be able to work all that stuff out, really makes a tremendous, tremendous difference. I'll conclude with 2 quick points. The first is that, as Rav Nati said, depression doesn't just end is something that is perpetually with you. For myself, I was on medication. That was a huge fight. I didn't want my doctor messing with my brain chemistry because that's inherent to who I am. For 6 months, I absolutely refused to go on medication. Eventually, I went on medication and afterwards felt like a moron because for me, and this doesn't work this way for everyone, it really did work like that. I imagine it's like when someone drinks caffeine for the first time. I just finally had energy back. And I remembered, I can feel this way. Cool. You forget what it's like to feel emotion and to feel energized. And when you're so deep in, and the analogy that I like to use from a Torah perspective is Yosef, my Hebrew name is Yosef, so I'm particularly tied to this one, is about Habor Reikvein Bomayim. That when you're so deep in it, you forget that there's anything outside of that. This is just the new reality. You don't remember a past that was, or you assume that the past that was never really existed, and you can't imagine a future afterwards. So you just exist in this dim and dark present without any way out. And then, you make it your routine, you make it a reality, you find a way to cope and to deal, and you make it work until it doesn't work anymore, until somebody else shows you, by the way, this could be different. And they're not going to believe you the first time or the second time or the third time. And eventually they might believe you. The second point is in terms of how it doesn't leave you. And I'll use a basketball analogy for this one, for any Derrick Rose fans out there, or for anyone who gets injured. The first time you play again, you're never sure how you're going to hold up. Because until you get fully back into life, you never know, is this going to stay? So both during therapy and after therapy, am I done with depression, or is this still with me? And for me, that was a huge psychological barrier. I wanted to be done with depression. Right. And it was a huge leap for me to be able to say, I'm not done with this. I'm never going to be done with this. This is going to be with me, but that doesn't have to prevent me from doing anything. And then it pops up in an unexpected way and smacks you across the face, and then you're annoyed because you think you're done with it. In a very practical way, that happened for me when I moved to Toronto. Not because Toronto's Toronto's a wonderful city, but it was just a major transition point, and I left a lot of my support network and a lot of my friends. And in some way, I kind of hoped I was leaving a lot of this behind when I was moving, just from a geographic perspective. But the reality is, once I got there, I was going through a major transition, and I didn't have a place to live, and I didn't have a friend work, and I'm figuring all this stuff out. A lot of old stuff started coming back. I'm I know you. How did you find me? And then all sorts of little triggers to myself that no one else would notice, but that I noticed, not shaving or letting my hair grow in. I know I don't look good. I couldn't help myself. But that, for me, were the tips of just I wasn't keeping myself in the same shape or the same appearance. And I have to deal with this. I have to go back. And it felt like a regression, even though I knew that it was there. And I think that's something that a lot of friends and supporters need to realize, is that it's not something that ends. It's something that's perpetually with that individual, although it might manifest very, very differently. And to also be sensitive to the fact, and again, I've had very honest conversations with my mother about this, that not everything is about depression. I mean that seriously. Yes, I had a major depressive episode. Yes, I continue to be depressed. The fact that I wanted to sleep in yesterday was not because I was depressed. That was legitimately because I stayed up too late watching movies and I was tired. I just needed to go to sleep. And I think sometimes that's a sensitivity that friends and family and supporters need to have. That, yes, be sensitive, be aware, ask. But if you ask every single time something conforms to your preconceived notion of what's supposed to happen, or because you were scarred by being a supporter, and that's something, by the way, that doesn't get talked about often enough, is how difficult it is for family and friends of people who have depression, who have to provide that caretaking and the emotional toll that takes on them to be in a relationship with someone who is depressed and then withdraws, can't provide them what they need, and they feel bad because they need to be the supporter, but they also need something from the person that they're with, and they're not getting that, but they can't feel bad because it's the other person that's depressed, and that becomes its own vicious, ruminating cycle. Not everything fits into that. It's okay for you to feel like it's a burden. It's okay, because on some level it is. You're supporting somebody else. We still need you. And we need your help, but it's okay, for you to feel that that's a challenge, and that's hard. And yeah, I don't know what else to add on that beyond thank you all for being here, and thank you all, I guess, for joining everybody on whatever it is. Basically, if you're here because either you're on a journey or somebody else you know is on a journey. And on behalf of those who are on their journeys, thank you for being there and supporting them in their journeys. And I hope all of your journeys are successful. Thank
So that was really inspiring to get to hear Rabbi Helfgot's story for the first time, and thank you.
You can't leave after that.
No, you can. That was. And Mark, we grew up in the same community, and there's so much that I didn't know about your life, and there's a lot that you don't know about mine. But I feel so grateful to you for letting me into your story, and this beyond just hearing about the journey and how incredible it's been in terms of how much you've grown and how much you've learned about yourself and faced really difficult things. Another thing that I'm just really inspired by is your willingness and your courage in being able to be open about that with us here today. And I do have some thoughts. I do have some things that I can add to this discussion, but I have to say that I could talk about it from a clinic, I could talk about it, but one of the things that I hope to get across tonight, more than anything else, is that what's most helpful in terms of helping people who are suffering, and by the way, I wanted to add that we're all on some kind of journey, and each of our journeys is different. And we're all, it's part of the human condition that we're all going to suffer in different ways, across the time of our life. And the thing that we can do to help people the most, I believe, is to be willing to embrace and look at honestly what our journey is. And the reason that that's most helpful is because that then normalizes the fact that we're all on one. And one of the things, Rachel, thanks for inviting me here today, and I really appreciate getting to be a part of something like this, and to get to really be to be able to bear witness to people doing exactly what I'm thinking is most useful, which is to be willing to let people into the fact that we are all struggling, and we are all on a journey, and we all have ways that we don't know where to go and how to best handle things, and we all have patterns in our lives that we're struggling with and that are getting parts of ourselves and parts of our experience that are getting in our way of being able to find everything that we're looking for. And one of the things Rachel mentioned is she wanted me to talk a little bit about specifically depression in the Orthodox community. And I think that there are some unique things to depression in a religious community. One of them is that there is this sense of community which can be really helpful to someone who is feeling that sense of feeling lost and not knowing where they fit in things. And also there's just this sense of interconnection and the sense that there are people who care about you because you're a part of their world. And those are all things that are very useful and very powerful about being a part of a religious community. I think one of the challenges is that sometimes there's a message that there's a specific way that things are supposed to be. And if you're not fitting within that framework, then you need to fix that. And there's something wrong with that, and that it's not godly or it's not okay. And it doesn't always become evident and clear that it's okay that we're all on a very unique journey, and that each of us is not in a position to fully understand or judge someone else's journey and where they are and what their experience is, because we just don't have the capacity to really understand what they're going through. And so 1 in 4 people do suffer from depression at some point between 20 and 40, but it's also, what one person's depression is doesn't capture what another's is, and yet at the same time, there are similarities and there are ways that people think that they're going through something really defective and really wrong and really bad, but in so many ways other people can relate to it. And so I think the thing that you can all do that would be most helpful in terms of helping others that are suffering is what you're doing here right now, and especially what Mark and Rabbi Helfgot modeled here today is a willingness to be courageous enough to acknowledge your own weaknesses and to not feel like you have to have everything together and have everything figured out, and that you have to fit within this very particular way of being, and that it's okay to be struggling. In fact, it's human to be struggling, and that we're all going to be struggling in different ways, and at the same time, we each have a unique way of being a part of each other's journey. And that's part of what's great about the fact that there is that sense of community and that sense of connection. I really can't capture a lot of the things better than Mark did in terms of that sense of different people are ready for different things at different times, and a lot of what I'm talking about is learning how to embrace your limits as someone who is suffering. But that's also true as a friend, that it's important to be aware of what your limits are and to embrace those. And at the same time, to figure out what you can offer and to try to offer that to the extent that you can. So there's certain principles that are generally true. One of them is, trying to figure out how to understand someone else's experience and solve it is generally not a good idea, kind of what Mark was saying. So advice giving tends not to work, but what is really useful is not to be afraid to really invite someone to let you into what their experience is, and to just accept that that's where they are, rather than try to fix it. To just kind of accept that that's where they are, and explore with them if there is a way that you can help, but not to impose your own ideas on what would be helpful to them, because that's really something that they may not know the answer to, but they have to figure out on their own. So, in that sense, part of your role as a friend is being able to let someone else go through their own journey, and at the same time to care about the fact that they're going through that, and to honor that. And you are in a unique place to be helpful to them if you've gone through some way that you could relate to their experience. And the best way to do that is to have been aware of your own struggles and not to hide from those. And so, saying to someone, I think you should get help, I think there's something wrong, it's not as powerful as saying, I understand that what you're going through sounds really painful and really difficult. I've also gone through something really painful and really difficult, and I went to a therapist, and that was really helpful for me. And I just want you to know that that's something that I didn't know necessarily was an option, or I had certain fears about, and that I faced it. And actually, what would be most useful if you do decide to recommend therapy to a friend, what's most useful to do, rather than continue to speak about that recommendation, is to take a step back and to ask them what their reactions are to your recommendation, and to really listen to their fears, and to create a space for them to talk about what it is about therapy that scares them, or what it is about therapy that makes them not want to explore it, and to be okay with that, to be okay with the fact that they may not be ready, or they may not be looking for that approach to help with what they're going through, at least at this time. But also to be able to listen to their concerns, and in a way where you don't have an agenda, but in a way where you can also present some alternative ways of looking at it. So if they talk about the fact that they're afraid that if, let's say they're afraid of the therapist really not understanding them and judging them, to be able to to explore that a little bit further with them, to say, so what do so you're afraid that the therapist is going to judge you? Is that what keeps you from being able to feel like you could talk to anybody about this? And so it sounds like that kind of leaves you in a place where you can't talk to anyone, I imagine that's really hard for you. And to stop there, just to reflect that that's hard for that person to be in that position, rather than feeling like you need to find a way to convince them or to find a way to fix the fact that they're in that position, to really just show them that you can sit with what they're going through and what's happening for them. Now, the other thing that's useful about really talking honestly with someone and trying to really create a space where you can convey that you care and that you're interested in hearing about their experience, is that it also gives you a chance to get a sense of to what extent they're suffering. And one of the things that they wanted for us to touch on tonight is suicide awareness and prevention. So most people who are suicidal are not going to commit suicide. In fact, I think it's like 2% of women who are depressed and 6% of men, something along those lines. Some very small number of people who are depressed are going to commit suicide. But at least having some kind of thought about wanting to end your life is something that most people in their life think about at some point. So at least like wanting to be dead, or just not wanting to wake up in the morning. At least some level of just thinking about wanting to be dead is something that at some point in someone's life most people experience. And so there's a whole continuum of and a whole range of experiences that people could be having regarding death and wanting to be dead and wanting to kill oneself. And it's actually really complicated to figure out how at risk any particular person is of killing themselves, and it's not something that you'll be in a position to figure out without having more training. But what you can do, which I think is something that people don't realize, is if you are getting a sense that someone is really suffering in their life, it's useful to ask that person if you're worried about them, to ask them, so after they describe to you some of their suffering, to say to them, considering everything you're going through, are you having thoughts about killing yourself? And a lot of people are afraid to ask that question, and they're afraid to ask that question for various reasons. One is that they don't want the person to think that they're judging them, or would think that they were thinking that if they weren't, right? Right, exactly. Oh, so that's another fear, that people have a fear that if you ask that question, then they're going to get that idea in their mind, and then that'll make it more likely that they'll do something like that. The reality is that there's been a lot of research about that, and it's clear that that's not the case. That when you present to someone, when you ask them that question, it doesn't make them more likely to commit suicide. Although that's one of the common big fears. The other one is that they're going to think that you're thinking that they're crazy, or that you're judging. That why would you think that I would think that kind of thing. Another one that people are afraid of knowing the answer. People are afraid of, like, oh, well, if I ask that question and they tell me they're suicidal, then then what am I supposed to do? And I think that those are all concerns that people have because they're good concerns. Like, it makes sense that you wouldn't want to make someone more suicidal. It makes sense that you wouldn't want someone to feel hurt and injured by your asking the question. It also makes sense that it's a hard thing to know how to handle. But I think that one of the things that's useful about a conversation like this is that it could begin to get you comfortable with the idea of asking that to someone. In fact, just to try to expose people, because people tend to be very anxious about asking someone else if they want to kill themselves. Can everyone turn to the person next to them in the room and ask them, considering what you're going through, are you having thoughts of killing yourself? Just to kind of expose yourself to that experience, and curious to hear what that's like to do.
Is that a reflection on how the speeches are going so far?
Considering the event that you're experiencing,
So, what was it like to ask the person next to you about that? Any reactions to it? Yes.
It almost feels a little bit silly. Maybe that's just because of the context we're in, and maybe that's
Correct.
never ask that kind of question.
Right. So it is a little bit silly to ask someone who you're just sitting next to.
Obviously, you don't really know what the heck the person next to you is going through.
That's true. Right. That's a good point.
Maybe this is a little too casual.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying. I don't mean to make it casual. I do mean sometimes exposing people to something that makes them uncomfortable makes them more likely to be able to feel comfortable doing it in a different setting. But I'm not saying this casually. I think it's a really useful thing for people to get comfortable asking people in the event that they're worried about them. Because I think there are so many situations where we don't ask, and it's really important to ask. Because it sometimes can be the difference between someone feeling very alone with these feelings and feeling like they're untalkable, and being able to put them out there to someone who can listen to their experience and can be in it with them. And that can be very valuable under certain circumstances where they are suffering, and so there isn't any kind of unreversible harm in asking that question. It doesn't make someone more suicidal. It doesn't leave them feeling judged if you do it in a way that's normalizing, and also. We're going to talk about what you can do in those situations so that you don't have to deal with the third question about what do I do if I find out the answer? And the cost of not asking that question, if you're concerned for someone's safety, is that they may then leave the experience with you in a place where they are still very alone with that experience, and they may be at significant risk of ending their life. And so the cost of not asking that question is a lot greater than the cost of asking that question. And so I wanted, to begin, at least for each of you, to begin to think about the fact that sometimes it may be helpful to ask that question, even though it's certainly not something that you were ever considering asking for some of you before tonight. And basically, in terms of what to be looking for, what to be concerned about, if someone says that yes, I am having thoughts about committing suicide, but I never do it, it's useful to follow up that question with something like, kind of what Mark was saying. Are you having any specific thoughts about, are you thinking specifically about ways that you'd kill yourself? Are you thinking specifically about, actually doing it? And if the answer to that question is yes, it's really important to get immediate help for that person. The other thing to do when you ask that question is if they ask you to keep it a secret, it's important not to agree to do that, because you don't know if you're going to be able to keep it a secret. In fact, it's generally important, talking about erring on the side of caution, it's also really important to not be alone with whatever the information is, to explain to them, I will, in response to that, asking if you could keep it a secret, in response to that, to say that I will certainly treat whatever you share with me, as something that I'm going to keep between me, you, and anyone else who needs to keep you safe. It's not something that I'm going to go and I'm going to share with anyone. But if I need help figuring out if you need more help than you have, then I can't just keep this between the two of us. To make that distinction between a secret and keeping things from the people that getting out in a way that's out of the person's control, or it could be out of the person's control, but out of kind of getting out into the world. So if they tell you that they are really specifically thinking about it, so another thing that's really important not to do if you are talking to someone about suicide is trying to talk them out of suicide. Because basically, if someone is suicidal, their experience is that there's a part of them that wants to kill themselves, and there's a part of them that doesn't, obviously, because if they were fully committed to killing themselves, they would be dead. Or they certainly wouldn't be talking to you about it. So basically, there's a part of them that wants to kill themselves because of how miserable they're feeling, because of how stuck they are in just a very specific way of seeing things. It's like their whole vision of the world is very narrow, and it looks very bleak, and it's they don't see a way out of the position that they're in. And so there's a part of them that just wants that to end and doesn't know any other way out. But then there's also the part of them that wants to live for various reasons. What those specific reasons are is something that sometimes you could also ask. But what you want to do is not try to argue against the part of them that wants to die. Because if you do that, they tend to get more in touch with the part of them that... If you focus on the part of them that wants to live, it puts them in a position where they have to defend the part of them that wants to die more in their own mind. And it actually could help them get more in touch with the part of them that wants to die. So you want to avoid doing that. Instead, what you want to do is you want to try to get them to help. F is going to talk a little bit more about some resources that you should be aware of in terms of helping you and helping them in these situations. But there's a national suicide prevention hotline that's available to you if, both to consult for if you're the one who's asking your friend about suicide, it's an opportunity for you to call that number and to say, look, here's our situation and we need some help and I need some guidance in terms of how to be helpful to my friend. And they will guide you and your friend to help you clarify what to do. But if it's an immediate, if you're immediately concerned for your friend's safety, then you want to call 911, and 911 is connected to emergency medical services, and they respond to people who are suicidal. So mostly what you're going to find if you ask someone if they're suicidal is they'll say no, or they'll say sometimes. And if the answer is sometimes, you do want to be a little bit more forthright in your recommendation that they get help soon. I was talking before about how it's important to respect someone else's journey, and it's important to really create space for them to come to things at their own way, in their own way. When it comes to someone being at a point where they're at least somewhat suicidal, it's really helpful to really encourage them and to share your own concern for them, and really wanting to know that they're safe, and really wanting to know that that they're getting the help that they need, and not wanting them to have to be alone with such difficult feelings and thoughts. So that's the gist of suicide prevention stuff that I wanted to begin that conversation with, and F is certainly going to continue the conversation, but this is not a sufficient conversation for you to necessarily be able to have a full understanding of how to deal with suicide prevention. And actually, F is going to talk a little bit more about other options that you can have if you want to learn more about how to respond to people who are suicidal and get more training, because there are resources out there that go beyond what I could capture in just a couple minutes. Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much, Yair. I really related to what he said, the exercise you went through. Quick caveat, I'm not a mental health professional. We're really more on the advocacy side, and I also have struggled like Mark and like Rob Helfgot mentioned before. But I did go through a 2-day training a couple of years back on the recommendation of a couple of my advisory board members. And these are great. And in some cases they're free in New York State. In some cases they're very, very affordable, like $25. 2-day assist training. And it's basically like CPR for mental health. You can look up ASIST, provided by New York State. In some cases they're free, in some cases they're underwritten. And on the second day, we were opt-in. On the second day, many people themselves were mental health professionals or worked in schools as guidance counselors. We'd been through a training, and we were told to do that exercise to basically simulate. One person is suicidal, one person is playing the friend, and we've been told, ask directly, are you contemplating suicide? And we found it so hard to say the S word. We were an opt-in group. We had all been through 2 days of training, many of us did this beforehand, and even us, we found it so hard, so uncomfortable. So, how much more so? Definitely understand. You definitely see how tricky it is. Yair mentioned, I'm just going to start off by hammering home this point. If you remember nothing else I say tonight, Yair already said it, but I'm going to say it again. If you know somebody that's in crisis, 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255, or if you can't remember that number, call 911. Seriously, if you remember nothing else I say tonight,
Give us that number one more time.
1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255, or call 911. And by the way, another great resource is I'mAlive.com. It's a play off on the word I'm alive, or I am for instant message. It's a way to basically get help online as well too. Elijah's journey, as you heard, is basically sort of founded to give sort of a Jewish response to the issues of suicide awareness and prevention. And I'll talk into a little bit of some things that we do. I see that there are at least 4 mitzvot. I'd say there are at least 4 mitzvot behind our mission, behind our raison d'etre. The first mitzvah, maybe obvious to pikuach nefesh, saving lives. All statistics I could give you about suicide nationally, the statistic that basically shocks people. So I tell them that suicides outnumber homicides 2-to-1. And that's actually that's internationally as well too. And that's just confirmed and reported suicides. If you want to know the numbers, there are roughly 17,000 homicides in America. The number of confirmed and reported suicides is nearly 40,000. And if we were to count unconfirmed, unreported, it probably rises up to about 50,000. So 2-to-1. It's also one of the few few causes of death that's actually rising. Think about it, most causes of death drop over time as we get better education and better technology. Medicine gets better. It's one of the few causes of death that's actually rising, continues to rise. So I'd like to throw out this question. So many of the decisions we make in our lives, we make decisions in our lives to make sure that we and those around us are physically safe. It affects where we live, maybe what profession we choose, how we live our lives, maybe where we vacation, what car we drive. All these decisions we make in our lives, how many decisions we make in our life to basically make sure that we and those around us are physically safe? Do we even take a fraction of that time to think about what decisions are we making to make sure that we and those around us are emotionally safe? Second mitzvah, nichum abelim, comforting those that are grieving. Those are mourning, and that actually was not one of the initial things that we thought we were going to do, because we thought that there were already a number of great nichum abelim initiatives out there. But we heard from people that have lost immediate families to suicide that they really wanted us to concentrate a little bit more on this as well too. And in fact, one thing we're working on that's in development right now, this is an example of something we do, is we're working on a document which we'll hopefully share with synagogues around the country when it's done. Document tips on visiting the Shiva home, specifically while people are singing Shiva for somebody that they've lost to suicide. And most of the people who are going to be the co-authors of this document are people who have been in that position of having sat Shiva for an immediate family member, a loved one, who took their own life. I don't know about you, but I often struggle with what am I really accomplishing when I perform Nichum Abelim. I know it's important. I know I'm supposed to do it. I know visiting a Shiva home is one of the most. I'm told it's one of the most important things I can do, and I'm told that it helps. But I often think, I don't want to be flip about this, but I'm thinking this person lost a immediate family member, and me showing up with tuna fish is really going to make a difference. But we have heard how important it is, specifically after a suicide. And this was articulated. I was at the overnight walk the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does once a year. And at the closing ceremony, a brother and sister talked, and they basically said something that stuck with me. They said, really one of the most painful things after suicide, as opposed to maybe losing a family member due to another cause, is that after you've lost somebody to suicide, unfortunately, their entire life becomes about their death, about how they died. We may not have the power to bring back a person's life, but by doing this mitzvah and by destigmatizing, we can help reclaim all those beautiful memories and all those great things that they loved about the person, because that person who they lost probably had a very full life and probably did so many amazing things, and they, at the very least, we should be able to give them the opportunity to appreciate all those great things about that person and not have that person's life be all about how they died. So that's another thing, that's another real important mitzvah that we can all be a part of. Third mitzvah we're proud of. No less than 6 times, no, I think it's 6, I know it's at least 6 times in Torah, we see the word v'samachta. That you're supposed to be happy. And it's a commandment to be happy, it's a commandment to make those around us happy. And working with this, we basically, it's important for us to say where at times we people in our midst that need a little help with that mitzvah. And where are times can we be helping other people around us to be happy and be happy with them? One of the things that we worked at that we worked on is a document for the Passover Seder. And I only have one copy with me tonight, but I'm happy to share it with people if you want to know more. We're probably going to reproduce it again this year. This was done as a supplement for people opening the door, when you open the door for Elijah. And it was an opportunity to call it to basically address the issue. Very, very quickly, our name Elijah's Journey, for those some of you probably figured it out, it comes from the story in Malachi Malach in 1 Kings chapter 19. This is after Elijah had a really good day at Mount Carmel. He's basically turned all the prophets of Baal. He basically turned the people who were worshiping the Baal. Now they come back to worshiping God, and Elijah's this big hero. And even King Achav is now saying Adonai Hu Elohim. And the next day, Queen Jezebel basically puts a hit on him, and she says, "I'm going to kill you." She says, "I'm going to kill you tomorrow." And there's a question there: why is she kill him tomorrow? Why shouldn't she just kill him right now? And one of the commentators comes up and says, "Well, because she knew that tomorrow people were going to go back to worshiping the Baal, so she said, I could kill you now, but then you die thinking you're some sort of hero, so I'm gonna wait till tomorrow so you can live to see what kind of failure you are, and then I'll kill you." And then Elijah, going back to the shot now, Elijah then in 2 verses later calls out to God and says, "God, please take my life." And God just wants his tongue to go on a 40-day journey and then reassess the situation. That's where our name comes from. So that's why we worked on this document. Potential reading. I'll just read a little bit from this. On this night, when we welcome Elijah to join our celebration, we acknowledge those who are so pained that they cannot fully celebrate, for joy eludes them. Although when we witness the physical wound with our eyes, we must also find ways to become attuned to their spiritual hurt and their emotional despair. The blood from the wound in their heart may not be visible, and the cry in the depth of their throat may not be audible, unless we train ourselves to attend them, but they are there. Our challenge is to see and hear the pain of those whose depression affects their lives. Our response does not have to be bold in order to make a difference. A still, small voice can transform a frown into a smile. A caring whisper that says, "I care," can raise a stooped head. A tender embrace can provide salve to a soul racked with pain. A still, small voice may have saved Elijah's life. Your still, small voice may save the life of someone you know. And one question that going back to the Samachta, one question that we had is, Passover night is supposed to be a very happy night. And as important as this is this really appropriate to talk on about the Seder? And the answer that we came up with is, on Passover night, in the Magid section, we read those 4 verses, the Aramio Be'avi, which is basically the backbone of the Magid section, which is the backbone of the Seder. And we cut it off after verse 8 of chapter 26. If you go on to verse 11, it then says, after all that, all these people are supposed to be happy with you. V'samachta, tave levi. So, you know what? It's not just, yes, it's a mitzvah for us to be happy, but it's also a mitzvah on Passover night to make sure that those around us are happy too. And if that means taking a small step to make the decision to make sure that somebody in our Seder who may need to hear those words, we think that's important as well too. And The final, oh, by the way, I just want to quickly acknowledge about this. A member of my advisory board who could not be here tonight but wanted to be is who's doing some great work is a woman named Dina Krug-Cohen, who's founder of an organization called Rifat Enu. You can find them at www.rifatenu.org. They deal particularly with mood disorders in the Jewish community, and if you want an easy way to remember them, they have, I think, one of the greatest Twitter handles of all time, Moody Jews on Twitter. So, rifatenu.org and JewsWithTheBlues.com also. And I can also give you Dina, and she is fantastic, and they do support groups. I think predominantly right now in the Teaneck area, but I think they're going to expand out. Those can expand out more, and she's doing great work. And she and Rob Nati are two of people on my advisory board. Also, I heard you mention Active Minds. The founder of Active Minds, Alison Malman-Malwald, also on our advisory board. We're very, very honored to have all of them. The final mitzvah that I think we're about is Kiddush Hashem. Elijah's Journey was founded on September 10th, 2009. Very, very quickly, I also went through a struggle myself, 2006. Thank goodness I came out of it and got involved with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and was ultimately invited to attend World Suicide Prevention Day at the UN in 2009. I've heard all these amazing presentations about suicide awareness prevention initiatives in various communities. I got a chance that when we talk about suicide prevention, the elderly, it was done, the presenter was somebody who was not Jewish, but he opened up quoting Heschel. And then when Dr. Donna Barnes, who's the founder executive director of the National Organization of People of Color Against Suicide, spoke about how suicide awareness prevention was at its most effective within one's own community, I said, you know what, if there are all these initiatives for all these other communities, I really think there should be one with the nuances of the Jewish community in mind too, and that's how Elijah's Journey got started, and Dr. Donna Barnes became the first member of my advisory board. And I really can say we all should be very, very proud. The Jewish community, I think, is on the forefront, often a leader on so many great social justice issues, so many issues of tikkun olam and gemilut chasadim. This may be one issue where we may have been a little bit behind the curve. And so I think it's important for us to basically just show the show the rest of the world that this is an initiative that, like all these other issues, that we care about as well too. And I think it's important to do that Kiddush Hashem. I left two things outside if people are interested. One is just a not very pretty page that basically just has our URL, Elijah'sJourney.net, which right now goes to our Facebook page. We're in the process of building a real web page, but right now you can get us through there, the Elijah'sJourney.net that goes to our Facebook page. And another thing is another example of the work we do. This past July 12th was actually that last time that we were going to be reading that Haftarah, which I mentioned, 1 Kings chapter 19, for 21 years. And I'd love to talk more about that, but I'll be here for another 20 minutes, and I know that I'm already over time. So I'm not going to do it right now, but you can read the document. Anybody wants to know more about it, we explain the significance of it. Email me. I'm happy to talk more about that as well too. But that's an example of some of the things that we're doing, and how we're looking to basically provide sort of a Jewish lens to this issue, and provide vehicles so these issues can be discussed with greater ease within various Jewish communities, or studied by people on their own who may need it. So I'm going to close. Mark alludes to, very interestingly, alludes to the story of Joseph. The story of Joseph also is very important to us as well. And I don't know if you guys remember, who can forget, a little over a year ago when everyone was talking about that whole Thanksgiving Hanukkah thing, that Thanksgiving, I think there were one or two people talking about it. Oh yeah, the rare thing. So that was very, very significant for us for a different reason. Hanukkah, following on Thanksgiving, set up something that was also very rare. It also won't happen again until 2070, which meant that the Shabbat before Thanksgiving was Parshat Vayeshev. Why is that so special? Well, Parshat Vayeshev, the Saturday before Thanksgiving is always American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's Survivor Suicide Day, and they do something special on Saturdays. I often try to basically teach something on that Saturday, on that Shabbat if I can somewhere. And Parshat Vayeshev is very, very important to us because that's when we read about Joseph in the prison. And the fact that we had those two coming together for the last time in several years meant we wanted to do something special. We actually went to Teaneck and taught at two synagogues there, one of which was Rabbi Nati's shul. And so why is Joseph in the prison so important to us? Well, I think many people know the story. Joseph's in the prison. He doesn't know he's ever going to get out. He's in his darkest moment. And then he meets this butler and baker, and he interprets their dreams, and ultimately he's right, and he gets out and becomes second to the king. And out of that, he reunites with his brothers, and then the Exodus happens, and Sinai happens, and really that sets up everything, basically, to us all being here today, right? But what's often missed in that story, how does he end up talking to the butler and the baker? He happens, and this happens very, very quick, and sometimes people who know the story very well miss it. He says one day he's there, and he looks at them, and he notices the Hinam Zoafim. They look distressed. And then he goes over to them, and he says, Madua Pnechem Ra'im Hayom. What's wrong? Why do you look so off today? And then they say, we had these dreams. And then everything that I described before happens. Let's think about that for a second. The whole course of Jewish history, if not world history, changed because one person, in his darkest hour, still had the presence of mind to notice that two people looked a little bit off on one day and said to them, Madua Pnechem Ra'im Hayom. And so, Chavera, just think about what power do we have to possibly all change the world. So think about that, and if you remember nothing else, 1-800-273-TALK, 911. Thank you so much, and Yeshua Kochachem, you really are an oar to the entire Jewish people by doing this tonight. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Yamit, and I want to thank all of our presenters for their very informative. Oh, there's heat blowing right on me right now. I'm like very happy right now. Okay.
That's actually why we all went over our time.
Right. This is yeah, exactly. I want to thank all of our presenters for their very informative presentations tonight. I think they gave us a lot to think about, a lot of information. And I want to thank all of you for sitting here past 10 o'clock at night, because you can open up a conversation, but there's no conversation without people to conversate with. And I'm really happy to know that everyone here in this room wants to have this discussion as with each other and with us as well. So I want to ask, all of our presenters are open to taking questions. I want to ask if anybody has any questions. Can you please raise your hand? Okay, 1, 2. Anybody here? This section, any questions? Okay, there's 2 questions in this section, so you raise your hand first and go.
And also, anything is on limits, by the way. Because I know that sometimes the hesitancy, if we're uncomfortable answering a question, at least for myself, I'll just answer, I'm not comfortable answering that. So really, if there's anything on your mind that you want to ask, please do not feel limited in the question asking.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. And also, I'll ask all of you to respect that if there's something you're touching on that they can't answer, you're going to be okay with that. Okay, go ahead.
This is a painful question, but since we're being open, I'll pose it as a parent. Now, several of the speakers mentioned the fact that depression never really goes away, that it stays with one in some form for a lifetime. Now, as a parent, if one's child is in a relationship, and it emerges that the other person has a history of depression and otherwise but has it quote unquote under control. It was otherwise an attractive, viable match. As a parent, do we say this person is not marriage mature, break it off? Or do we say it's worth a gamble, take the risk? How would you respond? How would you do that?
Is that question directed to anyone in particular?
No,
or
anyone who's on the panel who wants to answer.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm biased. I'll leave the psychologist to take the full psychological approach to that question. What I would say from a personal perspective, and especially to echo what Nati shared earlier, is that there's a big difference between being in a manageable and unmanageable situation. And I think that if they're in a situation where it is not being managed, and they're not dealing with it, and they're in the middle of something intense, and therefore not be able to be fully present or anything else, then yes, that person probably is not in a state where they should be in a relationship. On the other hand, if it is something that is managed and just a part of who they are, and to use terminology that a couple of people have echoed tonight, we all have our journeys, we all have this stuff that we're bringing into a relationship, whether that's the way that relationships have been modeled to us from our own parents, whether that's a mental health issue, whether that's issues with intimacy, whether that's money and the way we treat money differently, that relationships are obviously very complex and everyone is bringing their own history into it and assuming that people are being open and honest with each other. And I would say if the person doesn't disclose, then you find out that they didn't disclose that. Again, that's a warning sign, less from a depression angle and more just from an honesty angle. And that if, again, it is being managed, and if they are honest, then I don't see why that would be any different than any other issue that someone brings into a relationship, and I wouldn't view it as a gamble or a risk as much as this is the reality of the person that you have a relationship with, and if they have an honest relationship with them that's healthy and everything else, I would argue even if the person is unattractive, that I'm saying sex is an attractive relationship as long as he's clear that we're accepting of everything that everyone brings to a relationship, that I wouldn't view it as a gamble or a risk as much as just the reality that people are human.
I couldn't agree more. I think whether someone has had a depressive episode or not tells you absolutely nothing about them and the capacity for two people to be right for each other and to complement each other and to know how to be there for one another. When we talk about depression being something that doesn't go away, what we mean is that there's always the potential to become depressed again. Now that's not even, first of all, there are people who just have one major depressive episode and do not have any others throughout their life. That is, life is unpredictable, and you don't know what's going to come. And by pretending that we can have some kind of way of identifying something that can tell us, I don't think that tells you very much about someone and whether there would be a fit for someone or not, if they've gone through a depressive episode or not. I think the specifics of who they are, the specifics of what they've been through, and the specifics of how much it's managed or not are things that can tell you something about them. But I think it is important to recognize that someone can have a depressive episode and then never have a depressive episode again. Also, someone can have a depressive episode, go on medication, and be completely managed in a way that it doesn't affect them at all for the rest of their life. And obviously, there are situations where someone can have a relapse where they experience depression again, but that's this, someone could also break their leg for 2 weeks and they're out of commission for 2 weeks, and someone can also be out of commission for 2 weeks because they have to figure out how to manage, the illness.
Yeah, I echo everything that both Mark and Yair said. Personally, I'd say I had two major depressive episodes in my life. One when I was 18, one when I was 36. And both times, ultimately, I got help. During the rest of the times, listen, it doesn't go away in the sense that there are times that I'm in funks. But I would say that I would say that most of the time I'm not. And I would say that there are funks and there are probably days where I might have to think about how I'm going to manage things. But I would say that if you were going to tell somebody to not date somebody just on that person might be missing out on a really great person. I think that is part of the stigma. Look, when I was 36, one time it was very, very tough for me to start talking about this. That I was really worried that if I started talking about it, it would make me undateable or not married material. And when I started talking about it, what really amazed me is how many. I have a unique perspective because I talk openly about this, because I've started this. A lot of people confide in me, and you'd be really surprised at some of the people who confide in me. A lot of them are people that themselves are in very stable, loving relationships. And I don't think you can stereotype by that. And I'll just say one last thing. You want to Google, probably one of the probably one thing that I wrote that I probably love more than I wrote anything else. I wrote a blog post for Jewish School. Anybody here see the movie Silver Linings Playbook when it came out? If you didn't, I personally I recommend it, and not just because I'm also a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan. But
I recommend it as a Giants fan.
Okay,
It really is that good.
there you go. There you go. So I wrote a blog post called "Why Silver Linings Playbook Matters," and I tie into some of the aspects of Judaism on there. But one thing that I said about I love the movie, among everything else, is that kudos for them portraying Brad Cooper's character as very dateable and very desirable, even with all his warts. I think that that movie did so many great things, but that's one thing above and beyond it that people don't talk about enough, and I think that was very important.
Actually, there is some research done by someone by the name of John Gottman about red flags. He did a lot of research on couples, and he studied couples who were not satisfied and couples who were satisfied, and he looked at characteristics that existed before the marriage that might be, correlations with people who were satisfied versus unsatisfied. And he did find that there are 4 factors that are good predictors of there being a problem in a relationship, red flags. One of them is if one person wants to have children and the other one doesn't. The other one is whether if there's an unmanaged addiction or problem that the person isn't willing to deal with. The third is if they have very different ways of communicating. If one person tends to be an avoider and the other one tends to be a person who really kind of pushes issues, that kind of thing is a predictor. And the fourth is if someone is volatile and is unable to control their temper. There's also research that shows that people who are really able to be honest and truthful and open about their experience are more capable of having more intimate relationships. So I would say that, Mark talking about his experience to me is only
That's great. The other phone number you should remember is that one. Next question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first part is directed to all 3 of you. The second part is to Mark. There's a tradition, I think, a Jewish tradition that suicides were not to be buried in the cemetery. Do you think that casts a pall on how Judaism dealt with suicide or mental issues? And do you think that whole notion is just out the window because they weren't aware of mental illness? That's a question for all 3 of you. And then, Mark, you started your talk by alluding to how mental illness issues may intersect with your religious framework. Could you talk about that even in 2 minutes? Are you talking about doubt? Are you talking about how it's supported? However you want to treat it.
Sure. Does someone want to take the first part?
I would say yes, that I don't think they were aware of mental illness, and I think that most rabbis in today's, in the modern world, do recognize that that people who do commit suicide can be buried in Jewish cemeteries because they were sick, and that's why it happened.
Okay. 2 minutes or less. Sure. So in terms of the religious angle, I think there's a general component that could apply to everyone, and one specific component that happened because of my job. There's a lot of guilt associated with religion in general, and I think that only gets compounded when you are looking for reasons to feel bad about oneself, which, at least for me, was something that I did when I was depressed. And there are so many little things that, again, over time, I either stopped doing or wasn't doing it as consistently, whether it's tefillin or minyan or whatever else that's unimportant for this particular conversation. And those just became points of, oh, I feel bad for not doing it, but then I also wanted to feel bad to a certain degree, so I continued not to do it, was definitely a piece of it. Specifically as related to my job, since I was in a position where I was supposed to be educating and inspiring others, specifically as related to their Jewish identity, that led to a lot of imposter syndrome of I'm presenting myself as X, but in reality I'm Y, which is something that I probably would have been feeling anyway in terms of public face versus private identity, and that only got emphasized even more, that I became that much more sensitive to here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm not doing, therefore I'm feeling bad about. It definitely plays a role in terms of when it comes to Shabbat and whether wanting to go to shul or not, because those became socially anxious situations for me in terms of needing to perform or being draining, and therefore me avoiding going to shul or Shabbat meals, which then just further reinforced how removed I felt from the community as a whole. So like I wanted to be a part because I had to be a part, but at the same time I couldn't actually do it, and that just reinforced, oh, but how can I not do it because I have to do it, and therefore, and it just created a very unhealthy cycle in terms of my own observance and what it meant. I'll also say in the abstract, this is also why I would recommend, towards my own experience of finding a frum therapist, because there's so many dynamics that people who aren't from just aren't aware of. And again, you'll get just as much advice from the opposite direction. I'm sharing my own personal experience because of this crowd. And again, when it comes, for example, like take Shomer Negia, when you can have a conversation with a therapist, their view on sexuality is probably going to be fundamentally different than the Jewish view on sexuality. And it's very difficult to reconcile when the therapist says, by the way, you should stop doing this because it's not healthy for you. And now I'm going, well, this conversation isn't healthy for me because I can't stop doing this. So now, and that literally turned into a tug of war for a good couple of hours. But this is, I understand that you're telling me this isn't good for me by the same, and that just, again, further reinforces other religious identity issues that I would be having at that time anyway in terms of my own observance. And what am I doing for me? What am I doing for others? What should I be doing for myself? Someone's telling me this isn't healthy, but then that reaffirms, but how can I do that? Because I've told so many others. And then it all just, when something's just a core part of who you are, and everything about yourself is being questioned because of, I guess, the mental illness, obviously religion ends up being a clear place where a lot of those tensions play out.
Do you consider that you had the same personality before and after depression? Or do you think you were, I don't know, more outgoing before? Or?
I mean, I think personality is a relatively stable characteristic. I would say the way that it might have manifested might be different, again, before or after, just because I've learned coping mechanisms, or I've learned to put myself in different situations, or because I have more self-confidence than I did previously, I might act differently than I did previously, but I don't feel as if I'm a different person. Like, my value system's the same, personality, and again, a funny short anecdote on that. My mother's going through old papers, and she found my anecdotals from first grade. They might as well have been my performance review for last semester. Like, certain things are just stable, and I will be an over-egotistical know-it-all, whether it's first grade or now, depressed or not. And, yeah.
Just saying that, I think Yair hit the nail on the head. I think, thank goodness, most rabbis today take a different position on this than they did even just a few generations ago. But one of the reasons why, big things we do is take a look at text studies, is because for those that don't, I think it's important to, listen, I'm not a rabbi, I can't give them stock on this, and I can't say it, don't go wrong, but I can say, okay, you know what, that's fine, but let's look at Elijah's similar faith. Let's look at that he struggled, and he asked God to take his life. And let's have a conversation about that. Or even Moshe Rabbeinu. And it's interesting is that I've been talking this, and people have come up to me and said, you know what? I know the Torah well, and I've done this before, but I never realized that Moshe actually, in Bamidbar chapter 11, actually says to God. I mean, I've said to him, like, he doesn't really say it. Let's look it up. His exact words are, "Bimkacha at oseli hardeni na harog." If this is how it's going to be, this is when the people are complaining about bread, and then he sends the quails down. If this is how it's going to be, Moshe says, Hardeni naharog, please murder me now. I can't take it anymore. I can't, this is so bad. So if we're going to take that, so for people who would think that, I would say, okay, that's fine. But let's look at somehow our heroes, the people we hold up on a high pedestal. Let's look how they struggled. And we're saying, if it was okay for them to struggle, and we can still hold them in high esteem, then Kramer, maybe we should have a little understanding in terms of how those of the rest of us around here are struggling as well too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just want to remind everybody, thank you for your questions, and you can always come up, we can continue this conversation. Also, I want to ask you, please don't make us guess what you want the next topic to be. Please leave us your feedback on the index cards. We really want to bring the programming that's desired by everyone. So please give us your feedback. We really want it. Also, if you want to be the one standing under the heat next time, anyone who wants to lead the conversation, please let us know. Thank you for coming. Also, please remember to pick up the resources on the table on your way out. We have a lot of good information out there, and we're learning about more even tonight. We can update it and make it available on an ongoing basis through the Shul's website. Any other questions? We'll continue the conversation another time. I just want to thank everyone and say have a good night and stay warm.
Shabbat Shalom.
Jokes about phone numbers aside, if anyone does want to follow up with me privately about anything discussed tonight, this or otherwise, markfine@gmail.com. Happy to continue the conversation.
You can reach me at Elijah'sJourney@gmail.com.
Everybody, could you do me one favor? If you're near a chair, anyone is near a chair, just turn it to face that way. Just turn your chairs to face that way. We'll move them around.
Thank you so much.
You can drop off your pens by the table.
I just want to turn down around I know.
If you don't